Hello viewers, welcome back to Australian Surf Stories. My next interview is with master surf filmmaker and historian Dick Hoole. We caught up at his place at beautiful Byron Bay late last year. So please like, share and subscribe. Thanks and enjoy. Dick is a walking encyclopedia on all things surfing, so let's get into it. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi Tricky Dick, how you going? Loved all your shit over the last few years, untold years. And can you remember the date when you actually pulled up at when you flew over and you're on the hill taking the photo with, you filmed Rabbit outside corner after me and Jughead had just came in from being out there for 6 hours. We got washed in at Padang. But can you just give me that date that you flew over? And you too. Can
He's
you
not
remember?
very good at dates. It was 1975.
Yeah. But,
Lovely.
But yeah, I know it wasn't.
May, I think.
All right. Well, this is the good aid of Dick. So why don't you tell the punters, watch Dick's movie till the end?
Tubular Swells.
No, the interview I've done with him. Just tell them to. Because you know, like it can.
We haven't seen Dick's interview.
I know. Tell the punters to watch it to the end.
Now, when you watch Cool Hurl's interview,
Right
it's
to the
highly
end.
recommended.
Right to the end.
Yeah. Right to the end, to
And-
Windrose Village.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks, boys.
Boobies
Yeah.
and chili fish.
Yeah, that's it.
G'day, Dick. How are you, mate? We're going to ask you to tell us a little bit how we ended up, or how you ended up here in Byron Bay.
Dick's barefoot adventure began as a teenager growing up in Sydney in the 50s and 60s, sorry, the 60s. It was when I was a teenager. Started out riding surfer planes at Bondi at about 13 years of age. So that would have made it about 1954. Things were pretty primitive. What happened pretty soon after that, which was a unique moment on the timeline, was the arrival of Greg Knoll, Mike Bright, Tommy Zahn, and the other lifeguards from Hawaii when the Olympic Games were held here in '56, bringing with them the modern Malibu. So that kind of changed everything, and started with the the manufacturing industry that exists in Brookvale, the Brookvale Six, primarily Barry Bennett, Gordon Woods, all documented in Phil Jarrett's great film, The Men of Wood and Foam, which documented that whole transition. So it's after '56 when those manufacturers got the boards the Americans arrived with and really got serious about making, because they were superior to the toothpicks and what we understood to be surfing, that Duke Kahanamoku's arrival turned us on to. So there we go. It was the right point in time. Everything was changing. So it's now after '56, which means I'm 17. No, not 17. I arrived here at 18 years of age in 1967 after finishing school in Sydney, reading Bob Evans's magazine Surfing World, and understood that if you were a serious surfer, the pilgrimage was to head north, explore the fantastic surfing potential the East Coast offered the surfers of that generation. And we left Sydney, went straight to Crescent Head, and then Bob's brother, I think, discovered was a body surfer at Angara. He was famous for finding that, Dick Evans. And then of course Byron Bay, which is documented in Bob's films, the Gold Coast from Coolangatta. There was no snapper, was snapper rocks then, there's no superbank, and Burleigh Heads being the centre of our surfing universe, and the discovery of how unique it was up at Noosa Head. So the whole fantasy of these perfect point breaks, that littered the Australian coastline, not to mention Lennox Head and Broken Head, which were the main locations here. So arriving in Byron Bay as a stoked 18-year-old in 1967, because we'd had hung out at Bill Wallace's surf factory and learnt the art of making, understood how surfboards were made in the modern era, because we had foam and fiberglass and everything else then, and the Brookvale Six were often, you know, trying to keep up with the demand for people wanting surfboards. Even Gordon Woods was selling them, and Nat Young was shaping theirs, selling them through Knock and Kirby's in Sydney. It was a whole different era, but it was primarily based in Brookvale, where everyone, and that was what you got to realise, making surfboards was the only job a surfer could participate in if he wanted to, you know, put down the tools and be at the pass or Atlantic Head whenever the waves were good. You know, you worked your own hours. Not too many. There were no other jobs in the surf industry other than being Bob Evans or Albie Fowson. So 70, that era when John Witzig, David Elphick and Albie Fowson, getting his experience from Bob, started tracks. The whole thinking was not so much tune in, turn on and drop out, which was all the music of the era from the end of the Vietnam War and the psychedelic, you know, Timothy Leary influence on consciousness raising, was to move to the country and live in harmony with nature, which is why I'm still here. When we got to Byron Bay in that era, it was too good to leave, so Dick's still enjoying that same thing. Thank you, Bob Evans and Albie, for sharing that wisdom. It turned out to be a great experience. But then being here in those days when Bob McTavish and George Greeno arrived down, they were at Hayden Surfboards on the Sunshine Coast, you know, living the Queensland dream of surfing Noosa and all the bays unattended. And then in 1969, Nat Young has moved from the northern beaches and bought a farm here in Byron Bay. There was a lot going on, all documented by George, the incredible genius that he is, in his film, The Innermost Limits of Pure Fun, which were now, for audiences that didn't see that in 1969, it's been remastered and will now be soon available to see for everyone to enjoy and realise what George's great contribution and how far ahead of the time he was then on a theatre screen as a 4K restored film. That's the foundation, whatever this unique Byron Bay lifestyle is based on.
Yes, and it's a beautiful thing. I came in 74 too. It was amazing back then.
Well, again, it was a different point in time. It's not that we didn't have iPhones. It's you know, life was a lot simpler, yeah. And it wasn't tune in, turn on, and drop out. It was more, you know. I still remember the fantastic John Witzig photo that was probably in Surfing World of Bob McTavish living with in a farmhouse with then his partner Therese, with a whole lot of vegetables on the table, you know, living, you know, and Bob's an unbelievable influence from them right through till now, and he's still here enjoying that. But they were living in a farmhouse for $4 a week, which obviously, yeah, you didn't have to shape too many boards to be able to go, be it Broken Head or the Pass or Lennox, whenever the surf was good. So
I shaped a board in his garage at Lennox in 74, yeah. And I just started to do my own boards because had good boards off great shapers before, and but we lived at Cooper Chute for $10 a week.
That's what it was like.
Split three ways.
Today's audience who are playing with their iPhones that this is being filmed on don't want to hear that, but you know, that's how it was.
It wasn't our fault. It was just that it was mad if we didn't.
Well, I remember working at the meatworks because again there were no jobs. You know, not so much no jobs in Byron Bay. If you wanted to be a surfer and be in the water when the waves were good, making surfboards was, other than, you know, working at the meatworks or Norco, you know, it's an industrial town.
Rab says in his interview about the meatworks and the whaling station, you know, that it was full on. Just the meatworks was still here when I was working.
Yeah,
but for me as a teenager, it was like a university, you know, working with Bob and Warren. And
when Warren Cornish arrived too, which is interesting because he was Midget Farrelly's manager in Sydney.
At 18.
And I remember reading something recently, it might have even been on Facebook, even an old Dick, gets information from there now, that surf magazines, you can't get tracks for 40 cents anymore.
No.
Midget's business was shut down by a creditor, the surfboard business. Even though the story said we had plenty of surfboards as stock, it all came down to building a lot of boards that he sent overseas that was faulty foam, because it was the early days. And then after he went broke, and then Warren moved up here to Suffolk Park, and then Midget redeemed himself and got into surf blanks in the foam business, because he realised that's what undermined his ability as Australia's best surfer and the most talented and the person we had representing the sport.
They were the best blanks at the time too. I've had a lot to do with both of them, Warren and Midget, on completely separate things.
Yeah. Well, when Warren arrived here, because of his connection to not the Brookvale Mafia, they didn't like that term because they weren't the mafia. They were entrepreneurial characters.
They were fantastic fellas.
And we owe them an incredible debt of gratitude that they gave up. Bill Wallace, I remember telling Barry Bennett in the Men of Wood and Foam, well, you're mad. You're giving up a well-paid job as a lifeguard or electrician to go and make surfboards. I think...
Oh, they were so generous, those men. Yeah, that was my place. I lived at DY, so I used to go. That was my passion, to go around to those factories and
and it wasn't a healthy environment. I'm surprised that Barry Bennett lived as long as he did,
and
he was always there in a pair of shorts. Not so much the first one in the shop and the last one to leave, but he was immersed in all. It was an unhealthy industry in terms of the toxic chemicals, dust, fumes. And even the early foam manufacturers said, the chemical industry used us as guinea pigs. They didn't know about what the right mix of a foam blank was. It was all trial and error, and
nobody knew.
Surfboard factories were burning down on a regular basis.
Yeah, well, they used to have a little party trick where they mixed promoter and hardener together and make a bomb of a Friday afternoon when they were having beers.
Yeah, well, only
McGregor's, I think they did that.
Only a glasser, and that's what my role was when I came here at San Juan Surfboards, was sanding and glassing, because I had enough experience that I'd learnt hanging out at Bill Wallace's to do that.
Well,
so the catalyst is called MEKP, which stands for methyl ketone peroxide. Only someone who has smelt a lot of dirty acetone over their life would remember, and had enough brain cells still functioning, could remember that.
How do we remember that? You can forget where you put your keys, but you can remember methyl ketone peroxide.
Yeah, that's right. But so it wasn't a healthy industry. Even though we were in our prime and we were going surfing and we were in our 20s, and life doesn't get any better for you than that. But that's one reason why Jack McCoy saved me when he moved out to Australia after 1970, when he came down for the world contest. I'm still back at San Juan after going to Hawaii in '69 and meeting him there, and he rescued me out of, you knew where to find me. Dick will be back in a surfboard shop there making fins or glassing or doing something. Jack was here. He had McGilvray Freeman's movie 5 Summer Stories and needed a hand to distribute it in Australia. So
off you came. It became Hoole McCoy.
Well, later on. It didn't happen overnight, but that's because part of the reason was I said, gee, I don't want to still be doing this when I'm an old guy. The whole idea of working in that industry, in a dirty industry, until you're old enough to retire and go surfing in your old age. I think I was smart enough, or a trip to Hawaii and on to California at that time that educated me, well, there's got to be better opportunities out there.
I think you did well, especially to still stay in the surfing industry, because it's not easy. None of it's easy, but we've got to live the life, And
that's what it comes. Well, we're not here for rehearsal.
No, it's no rehearsal.
This is it, and it's not some Albie says Albie Fowson that I became friendly with, not because we used to surf together, but because I sold so many video copies and DVDs of Morning of the Earth. I had to make the pilgrimage to Albie's place down there at Guy Creek to pay him some money on a regular basis, which I don't regret, because it was such a beautiful association with somebody that, in terms of influences, if you've met George Greenough and you've met Albie Falzon and people like that, well, I hope you're intelligent enough to realise they're extremely fortunate. We didn't have iPhone influences back in the 70s, but the people you met at the beach, because there was no other way of catching up to them other than going to the surf films and stuff, a tribal gathering, to meet, and you didn't know who the person was that you were talking to when you were there in the morning to check the surf. We didn't have surf reports either. You showed up at the beach to see what the conditions were like. So
Absolutely.
it was a whole different world, but in its innocence or purity, it was a magic time and place.
So you've met Jack and became McCoy. Lead us up into Storm Riders and that period of Indonesia. So you went to Indonesia early on with Jack?
Yeah, that's because we got into the surf showing business, which was pretty unique. Bob Evans, he controlled all of that originally. Then Paul Witzig made his 3 films, Hot Generation, Evolution, Sea of Joy, over 6 years. Remember, we weren't graduates of any film academy. We had to learn from somebody else who figured out, you buy a Bolex and how to load the film and the basic things. It's photography, but it was the influences of the Americans that, and that's the same with Bob
So
Evans.
it was David Lowry, you said.
Well, before that, Bud Brown was an early filmmaker. He was making movies in Cal. Yeah, we owe all the start from prior to, Greg Knoll arriving in 1956. The movies had been made over there by Bud Brown and Val Valentine and early filmmakers. This is even before Bruce Brown, and they were the biggest thing for our brains to absorb, wanting to know more about this sport of surfing. It's the boards that they're riding, the places that they're surfing, watching guys riding big waves at Waimea, watching, Perfect Pipeline or something. Things like that were different, whether you grew up in Sydney or the Gold Coast or you're in Victoria. You had Bells Beach and you had Burleigh Heads and you had other places, but it was the information we got from watching these movies which made them so unique. And that taught us more about the things that we all wanted to do, not how to get the girls, but how to develop your surfing style.
Because the style was so important, wasn't it?
But it's like some guys figured it out better than others. There's people that look at Mark Richards to his 4 world titles. They called him the Wounded Gull, and his surfing style wasn't the same as Jerry Lopez, Mr. Pipeline, who figured out that style. And Rabbit, who's a classic example, I remember in Bill Delaney's second film after Free Ride Surfers, the movie, they were talking about style. And Rabbit very coolly said, style was everything. It was all about style.
Yeah.
But your style, you couldn't read a book of instructions or go to Kmart and buy how do I become a style master.
No. And I came from Sydney, the Northern Beaches, and each beach had a different style, from Manly through to Narrabeen up to the peninsula.
It was developed to it was different style to ride Narrabeen, those beautiful lefts, and it was to wick-whack around at North Stain in a beach break, with the exception of the Larry Blair, Wayne Lynch final they had on the surf about there, which never been as good since.
Okay, so tell us about you and Jack going to Bali and Indo.
Watched,
what year? And
tell
us about that.
Well, it's a simple story. We were like everybody else. Once I met Jack in Hawaii in 1969. I was working with Randy Rourke. So we went, myself and Carmel, my partner from Lismore, went back there for 6 months of the year because we realised, it's better living in Honolulu, and even though it was summertime, because that's when it was our winter. We went back there, and I could work with Randy, which is where I met Jack as a salesman in Weber, Hawaii. So we did that for the next 3 years, spent 6 months of the year in Honolulu, and just working with Randy and helping his business out and everything. But then in 1973, or when Morning of the Earth was released here in Australia, because we're relatively cool guys. Jack's writing stuff coming from Hawaii for the surf media, showing the movies, and that was a big deal. He had Five Summer Stories is one of the best surf films of all time to start out your film showing careers with. You're not starting with a lemon. McGillivray Freeman's success gives you some indication, and if you don't know them, go Google it. They're incredibly successful filmmaking couple, and even after Jim Freeman died, and that's kind of like why we came up with Hoole McCoy Films. We wanted to be we wanted to be as cool as what Greg McGillivray and Jim Freeman were. We realised these guys have nailed it. Why don't we try and emulate them? So
what was your first movie, Storm Riders?
Yeah, so in '73 we went to Bali for the first time after seeing Morning of the Earth. Obviously, remember Dick ended up here in Byron Bay, but he's a goofy footer, and even though I enjoyed surfing the pass and as much as anybody did, it was a whole different experience to go up there and see what Indonesia offered a goofy footer, and the best of the Australian goofy footers, all of them: Richard Harvey, Tony Elthrington, Terry Richardson, Peter McCabe, Larry Blair, not to mention Wayne Lynch, who was up there on our first trip in 1973. But Jack and Dick were still photographers then. We hadn't bought a movie camera. Our friend David Sumter, the Mexican, took Wayne up there. I think Jack suggested, he said, well, Wayne hadn't been in a movie for quite, since the Paul Witzig days. And Mexican took him up there in 73. And not so much the rest is history, it's just, unfortunately for Wayne, he had a bike accident, got malaria in hospital, missed out of the next 20 years of every goofy footer living their dreams up there in surfland. So the expense, not only the fact that Uluwatu was uncrowded, we knew where it was because Albie had shown us watching that in the film, said, well, gee, that looks pretty good. And it was our Hawaii, it was kind of islands close to Australia, just like off California they had Hawaii, and all the Californian surfers migrated over there, not to take over, but to enjoy what Hawaii offered. This was our equivalent, and it was unknown, unsurfed. And our generation was the first to go and open it up and explore it and discover the full potential. Surfers like Kim Bradley, and Albie says Kim, he was one of the grommets from Avalon when tracks in the early 70s. He said, Kim showed Morning of the Earth. This is a 16mm film that you had to travel around with and put on and screen and collect the money and somehow not spend it all before you give some back to Albie. He said, Kim showed the movie, kept the money, went to Bali and never came home. And Albie's not pissed off he didn't get paid. He's pissed off that he didn't make the same decisions as Kim did and went up there and lived in Indonesia for the next 10 years. And
everybody's big regret not going there earlier, except the ones that did.
But when you think of it, getting back to Albie and David and John Witzig, that's an amazing success story in itself, seeing it was 50 years ago now.
Yeah.
They started tracks in 1970, as well as doing 12 issues a year of the magazine. They made Morning of the Earth, which came out in the summer of 72, and that's when we saw it here in Australia. So 6 months later, when it's the winter of 73, we were up there. And anyone living in Victoria, it's a great opportunity to escape winter. And even on the Gold Coast, it was still a good migration to.
For sure, it was. How acclimatised have we become?
Well, but so we that year. So David Sumter, his film was successful, and.
What was that on Any Morning?
On Any Morning, yeah. You had Jeff Hackman, Jerry Lopez had come because they'd seen. That's another great story. So I had a cover shot on tracks which was October 1973, from our first trip up there, of Wayne Lynch surfing at Uluwatu. And I was young
And you
enough.
were swimming in the water?
Yeah, a Nikonus camera.
Yeah.
I was clever enough to have a Nikonus camera, and just like Peter Crawford made it famous. But remember, you had to have the technical knowledge, and you had to be fit enough to swim out there.
You had to get close, didn't you?
Jet ski assist and boats to film from.
You've got some photos of me out there at Ulu's, and but yeah. So what year was it that you and Jack did Storm Riders and not?
Well, Tubular Swells was first.
Oh, Tubular Swells
in
was
'75.
First. Okay. Tell us about that.
Well, '75. So I bought the house at Mermaid in '73, and decided living on the Gold Coast was a better deal than life here in Byron Bay. There was more going on. I remember being to Hawaii and California, and there just seemed better work opportunities, and it was an exciting time to be on the Gold Coast in the '70s. So we went to Bali. I didn't buy the camera. This is an interesting story because Ma Bendel had the contest. Pa Bendel had passed away by 1975. They had a contest which had prize money of $5,000, and everybody, from Midget Farrelly to Peter Druin to Michael Peterson, Terry Fitzgerald, even a couple of Hawaiians, all, it was a lot of money at that stage for him. So I was up there probably trying to play, foreign correspondence for tracks. Ma sold me Pa's camera, the 16. He was a Canadian airline pilot that married Ma. He died, had a 16mm camera, which weren't easy to find, and Ma sold it to me. I've even got the receipt from her, which just reminds me when we started. So then I came back after that event, and that's when the phenomenal swell, living at Mermaid. Then Burleigh, for some reason, has a incredible 30-day swell where it
What year was that?
So 75. It was straight after I bought the camera. So Dick's in the right place at the right time again, and somehow I'd figured out enough as a photographer how to try and make it all work. And so, we had Jeff Hackman was there on the Gold Coast, and everybody was there. Ted Spencer, not to mention the Nielsens and Peter Druin. Yeah, Michael Peterson surfed Burleigh because it was a lot more consistent than Kira. So the outcome of that which we kept. Now we went back to Indonesia and Hawaii, was Tubular Swells. So you're only as good as your last film. Fortunately for us, with our distribution experience, the film was well received. So we're very appreciative of the Australian audience, but it was just hardcore surfing.
Incredible. And so you can learn about your cameras and that sort of as you go, but it comes down to the content, doesn't it?
Of course.
Like perfect surf at Burleigh with the best surface in the world. It's pretty hard to screw it up. Within reason.
Later on, they had, which was after we did Storm Riders, that was 77 when they had the first stubby. So this was prior
and
to that.
So you already had the and the practice.
And we'd already distributed the film successfully too. Not only here in Australia and
that was
at
the
the Opera House.
birth of pro surfing in Peter Druin's stubbies and.
Yeah, well, it changed everything.
Yeah.
There was a whole. We went around the world in 1977.
The tour, yeah.
To show the movie in South Africa.
Oh, right, sorry.
And then we showed it in England. Rodney Something was the distributor. We had the hottest. The whole world wants to. It's it. As Jack McCoy has just found out with the success of his documentary tour on Instagram. Well, it's not only that people packed out theatres 25 years later to see the show that he amazingly put on, but he had contacts from all the other countries saying, well, bring
the roadmap was already
bring it over to Europe, bring it to Japan, bring it to America. Well, it's just we love hockey too.
The original roadmap plus the veins have gone out. It's
in the 70s and the 80s, they were the golden years for the surf industry growing internationally.
Yep.
We all watched that and wished we were clever enough to buy shares in Billabong when it floated.
Okay, so Tubular Swells at Burleigh, that one. And then you've already been to Bali, and we
went back every year. Once you discovered it, was just like we went back to Hawaii every year once we figured out, gee, this is better than living at Suffolk Park or even Tallows at those days.
Lennox is great, but
Well, it's
Who
just the
loses- who loses
experience.
better, yeah.
You're a sponge.
Yeah.
You're trying to absorb knowledge and life experiences and things like that. And you go to school and you get a certain education, but some of the subjects they teach you you're never are not going to be of any use to you whatsoever once you go out in the real world and start earning a living.
Okay, so that's mid-70s, Tubular Swells, and basically based on those guys you mentioned at Burley.
And then following that, there was Free Ride. You've
yeah,
spoken to Rabbit. And we've just seen that again. There's
Yep.
tracks re-released that for the people who weren't there in the 70s.
Yeah, well, you were up at the Gold Coast, and I saw the mechs there.
Again, it's a big screen experience. A surf film was unique. Every surfer, came from miles around.
It still holds its place.
You're creating
it's
an
still current.
event
Yeah.
as a tribal gathering,
But that
and it's on the
surfing's
big
still,
screen.
It's still current, like Sean Thompson surf,
look,
tube riding and that.
It came out, so after Tubular Swells, we did such a good job with that, and we met Bill Delaney, and I was good friends with Dan Merkel, so on the results of us being in Australia to do the job, we got that movie as well. So and so you can see 5 Summer Stories, Saltwater Wine, an Alan Rich film, all the movies we got to show, and Winter's Tale. We didn't show Morning of the Earth. Steve Otten was the main distributor of that. Now Albie had his own people, but still that freed us up where we could make our own movie, and then we were players in the game. And about the same time, Peter Troy and David Elphick and Paul Witzig were kind of older than us and retiring or going on. David made more films. Paul became more of an architect. Albie was super busy with everything that he'd created, which was amazing. I was saying that before. They created 12 issues of tracks a year, made Morning of the Earth, which was Australia's best surfing film to date in terms of its public acceptance, its grosses, and the music, and how it withstood this test of time. And then a year later, did Crystal Voyager, which we're now going to have the opportunity to see. David Elphick and Albie did most of the filming, but David and George now are re-releasing that will get that, and Innermost Limits of Pure Fun. Done deal. Go and have a look. Do your homework. Forget Google. Go and have a look at those movies. I'll tell you everything you need to know.
It'll be
about
on. You don't have to.
How fortunate the generation was to get to live and experience those places. You see what it looks like at Uluwatu today, with bars hanging off the cliffs and the rocks. And I'm amazed the Indos had the ingenuity to build them, so they still stay there. But surf spots and the rest. If it is too good to be true, well then other people are we're an intelligent species. If someone looks like they're having more fun than you are, well you obviously want a little bit of what they're enjoying.
We were very lucky, but without getting too sidetracked. So you did the Tubular Swells, and then those other movies that you're in. That was your job by then. Your career.
Business, your
career.
We showed a movie every year at the Opera House, so that was we could earn an income showing films to the Australian audience in summer, and after Easter, and by May, we're already packing our bags to go back to Indonesia for their season.
Back to Bali.
Bali, and then opened the door to Java and the Nias and to Lombok and to.
And what year did you go to Nias?
First time with Thornton Philander for Storm Riders, our next feature film, was in 1980, because we had the Young Guns. It was a similar story. New faces surfing new places. That's about a surf without a script or actors. That's what a surf film, the highlights are. So we had surfers like the Young Guns on the Gold Coast, of Joe Engel and Thornton Philander, which were test pilots for Dick Van Stralen's designs, and were young hot surfers. Joe Engel won 2 pro juniors, just like Tom Carroll did, to start his career. So he had the potential and was a dynamic surfer. But I think their sponsorship with Billabong, they got a free pair of board shorts. I remember Thornton trying to write a proposal for Gordon to get him to help fund the trip to go surf this fantasy place up in Sumatra that people were aware of because there'd been photos in the magazine, but nobody was giving you a roadmap to tell you where it is and how you get there. So Thornton, to his credit, realising, well, geez, we're back in Bali with Dick and Jack hanging out, and it's pretty hard to get a sequence, a better sequence than Jerry Lopez at Java or all the rest of the surfers, surfing on the front side at Uluwatu. We need a good right-hander. And so Thornton was clever enough and spoke enough Indonesian for him and I to take off and go up there and actually find the place. If it wasn't for Thornton, I figure I would have given up and said, after a day in Medan or somewhere, or Sabolga, on the way to discover an unknown location, the novelty quickly wears off. We went, because we found the place and got such great footage, we went back again in 1981, and that's when Joe Engel came along the second time. It was too good. And the film didn't come out till the end of that year, and that was, one of the climaxes of Storm Riders, which is, again, why didn't Dick make a lot more movies like Jack's done? Because I figured with David Lowry, our editor's help, we did such a good job with that I didn't, and I knew how much work was involved and how much it cost, that Dick wasn't going to volunteer to go down that road again.
Fair enough.
So, and I figured that's, I'll sign off on that. Look at the cool change sequence with Wayne Lynch surfing, wherever the location is in Australia, or the mystical left-handers, and Thornton and Joe at Nias and everything else we had in the mix. That was, at that point in time, we had a soundtrack album by EMI. It was a lot of work. And I think
legendary footage of those two.
I'll sign
out
off on that for being, what's involved to make a better film than that, and the costs involved, and then having to work your ass off to recoup the money doing everything. You can only do that when you're young and enthusiastic and everything else.
Okay, on the way down here today, I remembered a time when we were all staying at Arena Bungalows.
Yeah.
And my brother and I were on the same plane as Tony Doris.
Yeah.
And David Cross, was it?
Yeah, David Cross from Saffron's board shorts.
A great
friend.
He was a former Hong Kong policeman, wasn't he?
That's
character,
right.
larger-than-life character.
Yeah, that's right. That's where he met his wife Violet up there.
And we were on the same plane as them. And for some reason or other, we've gone through Hong Kong or Singapore or something, and but then we've all ended up at Arena Bungalows, and you were staying there.
Yeah, of course.
We're all staying in the rooms, and Dave Kennedy was staying there too, and which I've been chatting with him a little bit later.
Yeah, no, again, that was, we had, because we went back there regularly, we knew we had our routine, we had our places to stay. We even left all our equipment up there, so you didn't have to take tripods or surfboards back with you each stage. But also we stayed at Kim Bradley's at Safari Inn with Kim and Made. That was one of our other addresses. So but great years because of what it was like up there at that point in time.
It was still uncrowded, and you had to walk to Padang and walk into Bali.
Yeah, well, that made a big difference. That's right. Well, it was. I think the history goes, and there's people like Steve Palmer and the other people that have been up there and had done very well out of the surf industry. The government, Steve and his partner in Om Clothing, Michael Shaheen, sponsored the first pro contest up there in 1980. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the thing to get the government's involvement, they started building that road in via Padang, which changed everything, obviously, not only for Padang.
What year did that come in? That was like a fair bit later, because I think 84 still, you had to walk from Mulu's.
Good. And, well, again, that was made it a whole different experience in turn. But in Padang, which is one of the Dick's top 10 beaches in the world.
Oh, but you can't surf there anymore. It's too crowded. I just saw something recently ridiculous.
Oh, well, when you see excavators on the cliff, knocking the cliff over.
That footage is sad.
Well, it was sad because it was such a. You know,
That's
that was
down
a very
in front of Impossibles.
yeah, that's right. Well,
Yeah.
from Bingen down
Yeah, yeah.
down towards
Yeah,
a
in
beautiful
between.
part of the coastline. And
The whole
everything.
book it there was, you know.
It was dry and arid, and
Yeah.
the reason there was nobody out there is kind of that's where the poor people lived.
Yeah.
You know, I remember the villages that we got very friendly with at Windrose. The road in from where the BMO left us was only one road path to get through and to stop the animals getting out of the paddocks. They had all this, you know, spiky
The
cactus
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
stuff lining the walkway, which, you know, didn't give you a whole lot of room to move. And it only went from the road to the village, and then from the village down onto the reef.
But it
so
crisscrossed around. There was you
Oh, yeah.
needed the McCabe boys to guide you in. That was the thing. But it was the best dollar you ever spent.
Yeah,
You
well,
know.
it started up being a cigarette in the beginning.
Oh,
Was
right.
the older
Yeah.
guys, and even Windrose's dad, grandpa, he was 80 years of age, and he still wanted to get in on
Yeah.
I carry board deal.
Yeah, me carry and and be lifelong friends from those guys.
Oh,
those
yeah,
kids that
well,
carried our boards, you know. And,
Yeah, that's right. And we got very close to them because they'd never left the book in. I remember when Tubular Swells was finished, we got a screen, which I think was nothing more than a big sheet, up at the temple at Uluwatu. We had to take a generator because there was no electricity, and a 16mm projector, and we basically created a drive-in theatre type environment to show them Tubular Swells. And I'm sure there's still a few Balinese who'll remember that experience, which was pretty amazing for them to be so poor. They just live out there. At Windrose Village, they had difficulty even growing orange trees and making them survive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was so dry and arid, wasn't it? And terrible land, and not good for anything.
But a view of the ocean and a perfect wave.
And one of the best waves in the world.
Yeah.
And
I think Uluwatu is the original wave pool. You know, Kelly Slater and everyone else has gone to a lot of trouble to create their version of a perfect wave, but Ulu does it every day.
It seems to. There was years there, and the people had said that they'd been and they had flat conditions or something like that. And I don't know how many years in a row that I went, and I didn't believe them because I'd never seen it flat, you know,
Particularly in the surf season.
In the season, yeah.
And the full moon, which is, from May to
April to October sort of thing.
Yeah, May to October, that's about it. April's Easter, Easter was...
I've had some of the best waves too in October, so it'll... So, when was the first time you went to the Philippines? We're into a new era now, so it was.
Don't remember the exact year, but I was with Roy Norris on groups he was taking up there. People he knew. He was working at Prime Television in Wollongong, and was at the advertising guy down there, and had groups of people that he'd take up there, surfers. He'd been up there himself. His best friend was living next door. He'd married a Filipino, and that was a big influence. So he realised it's an unsurfed frontier up there. So he's taking trips of people up there, and because I was a cameraman, I went up there to document it so that he could get exposure on the TV and make that business grow. And then later on, he did Billabong Surf TV, Trax Surf TV. It was the longest running surf program in Australia. It had 3 different sponsors. It ended up being Surf Cult Wave Riders at the end. And I was the cameraman because it was kind of...
Is this at La Union?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, they started having events there. We were dealing... It was in the Estrada administration. The Minister of Tourism was like an ex-Miss Philippines International Glamour, and a very stunningly beautiful, very intelligent lady as well. So we were dealing with them and the Australian Embassy, and I've got a book downstairs signed by President Estrada, recognising that and because Roy had sold me as, well, look what Albie Fowson did for tourism in Bali and Indonesia, and Dick's part of that. He can do the same for you. I was telling them what they wanted to hear, because they realised, well, we've got we've got lots of islands, we've got great surf. How do we increase, from the US military and the Aussie Yobbo bar guys? How do we get these, the surf tourism market? So Roy sold them, well, Dick's your guy.
It's blanket bingo over there now, and we're not going to blame you for that because
well, no, it's the potential of the place itself. It's still a plan B for me. If for something I could still go back there from the trips that I've had, the friends that I've met, and the places I'm aware of, to go and spend some quality time.
More fun in the Philippines, they say.
If it wasn't so enjoyable here, I'd
know.
have a
That's why
address.
I would never go all in. I like where I live too. So half is pretty good. But so we've gone Byron Bay early days, then
Indonesia.
Then the Philippines.
At least eight or 10 trips to the Philippines for all those events as a cameraman because the other respectable guys that was the editor and the cameraman Mark Frangic that were part of Roy's group to produce the programs at Prime TV using their facilities. The night shift, they just had they had the whole TV station to make their programs with. But then it grew so much with sponsorship and surfing that they left their jobs at the TV station and started Mighty Big Images and did it all themselves.
Wow.
So there's a phenomenal amount of material.
I think probably late 90s. No?
Through the 90s, that period. And ever since they had the first union contest and everything, because the government was all behind it, and that was and Roy cleverly had a TV program in Australia to for all the exposure of the showgrounds.
Married up perfect.
Yeah, and that's and he could provide them with masters where they could show them in the Philippines to help them. They were trying to exploit their tourism potential, and it worked so well throughout Indonesia that they didn't need a better model than that.
No, and I don't know what's happened from that, but it's as I said, beach blanket bingo. Surfing's the biggest thing over there now, and they've got contests everywhere, and they've got Mark Tokong, I think is his name. He's on the Challenger series. He's an incredible server from Siargao, but the ones that impressed me that I saw online with the lady longboarders. They were world class.
Yeah,
world class.
That's right. Pacific longboarder running photos. I don't know if it's Pendergast. But she's got so many followers and everything up there, and she makes.
I met a boyfriend out in the surf over there, but I'm just
turns heads here. Turns heads here in Australia.
She grew up at Siargao, I heard, and then I met them there, but not at Cloud9. But what's her first name? I've thought about it. It came to mind, and she's sponsored by Bob, and I
see a lot of photos of her surfing here in Byron Bay.
Yeah, well, that's
and I think she's got more photos.
Apparently, her dad married a Filipino, and
he's got more followers on Instagram than Kelly Slater.
Oh, really? Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks, Dick.